A group of Eritreans based in the Netherlands is taking the EU to court over its funding of a project in Eritrea which allegedly uses forced labour. The suit focuses on a European Commission decision to build a road linking the Ethiopian-Eritrean border with the port of Massawa. Workers are national service recruits hired for an indefinite period of time. So far, the EU has spent €80 million on the project as part of the Emergency Trust Fund for Africa. The fund was created in 2015 to pay for job creation schemes to try and stem the migration of Africans to Europe. Well, for more on this legal action, I'm joined now by Emil Jurjens. He's attorney at law at Kennedy van der Laan in the Netherlands. Well, thanks for taking time to speak to us here. Tell us more about what evidence you're bringing to the court to support these claims.
Thank you very much, Toke. It's a real pleasure speaking to you, coming from Amsterdam here. Well, the evidence, it's really pretty clear because the EU actually acknowledges that forced labor will be used in the project plan. This is a project which was started in 2019. It represents a major break from development work in Eritrea because previously, given the massive human rights violations which are occurring there, the EU has found it very hard to actually disburse any funds because it would be very hard to fund any project which would not in some way violate human rights. But in 2019, that changed. And in fact, if you read the project plan for, it is indeed a road building project, as was just mentioned, the EU literally states that people in the so-called national service will be used. And in order to be able to understand what that means, you have to know that the national service is a euphemism. The Eritrean regime forces people to work against their will in what is called the national service. It is open-ended, so once you are drafted, which is in any case when you're 18, but sometimes even earlier than that, you are being put to work, and that can be anywhere from the military, but it can also be civil jobs, such as being a teacher, or, for instance, working in construction, as is the case here. And that is what national service means, and it is also one of the main reasons Eritreans are fleeing their country, because, as you can imagine, once you are being forced to work on something that you have no choice in at all, without a horizon for when that might end, you have no perspective anymore, and so you're looking for a better life abroad.
So if the EU has acknowledged this, as you say, you're expecting this to be an open and shut case. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, when we read the project plan, my client is the Foundation Human Rights for Eritreans, which is a Dutch-based organization of Eritreans in the Netherlands and elsewhere who are concerned about this and about other violations of human rights by the regime. In fact, the case is very easy substantively. However, we expect that the EU will make a number of formal defenses and will really comment and defend itself along formal lines, because in fact it is very hard to deny that forced labor is being used in that road construction project. As I mentioned, they acknowledge it themselves. So the EU will probably do anything it can to stay away from that discussion and will look more to filing formal arguments why a court, for instance, not be competent, or why, for other formal reasons, the case is not admissible or should be filed elsewhere. And this ties into a larger issue with this type of aid, because the EU has formed this aid in such a way that it is slightly outside of the regular EU systems. So it's very hard to hold the EU accountable for these types of actions. So this is, for my client, the Foundation Human Rights for Eritreans, one way to try and actually do that, especially because the case substantively is so open and shut, as you say correctly, I think.
So what would you say to be, because, if you look at the facts and figures, a huge number of Eritreans are coming over to Europe. The EU, of course, is under constant pressure to do something about the migrant problem. They've spent €80 million on this project. What else could they be doing?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, it is, I would say, not for the Foundation to say what the EU should be doing, but you can imagine it could be doing a lot of other things with the money other than funding a road construction project. You can imagine the money could go to healthcare, could go to other social projects which are less controversial, perhaps. However, the EU has its own reasons to pursue this project, which are, I guess, political in nature. I don't want to second guess what they are doing, but as you say, one of the main aims is to stop migration. However, if that is the aim, that is not working, because since the project started, the information my clients have is that migration is actually not slowing down at all. In fact, sometimes it's maybe even a little bit more, and sometimes it remains the same based on the information, for instance, in Ethiopia at the border. The expectation of the EU was things will get better in Eritrea, the national service will be reformed, the borders will open with Eritrea, with Ethiopia, and none of these expectations have come true. So this leaves the foundation to wonder, why is this project continuing? And that is also a question the European Parliament is asking. One of these days, it may have been today, but I have not yet been updated, there has been a vote in European Parliament also on this project and whether it's actually desirable to continue with it. So,
Emil Jurjens, attorney at law at Kennedy van der Laan. I'm sorry about that. That's all we have time for on the subject. Thank you for discussing that action taken by Eritrean activists against the EU.